Jack, broadcasting live from California. I am posting several videos ni Pbbm sa Kapihan sa yung podcast niya, parts 1, 2, 3, particularly sa aking mga members. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Uunahin ko muna yung podcast niya, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Sandali lang.
On your recent SONA.
Okay.
Isa ho sa pinakapinalakpakan doon nung sabihin ninyong pananagutin ninyo, paimbestigahan ninyo yung mga palpak o di kaya non-existent na flood control projects. If I may mention some numbers, Mr. President, our news research came up with the number 980.2 billion na appropriate for flood control in the last 3 years.
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds right.
First, can you tell us, sir, what exactly did you see? And what information did you get to decide to confront the issue of corruption in flood control projects and to hold people accountable?
It started in last December. Nung umiikot ako dahil nga sunod-sunod yung bagyo at nakikita natin kung talagang napakabigat ng ulan. Nung nangyari na naman itong bagyo ngayon, pagpunta ko, nakita ko hindi nagagawa. Akala ko ba meron tayong linagay dito? Hindi pa naumpisa, whatever, the usual excuses. Sabi ko, kanukuhan na ito. Maliwanag na hindi ginagawa ang trabaho. Tapos pupunta ka sa evacuation center. Makikita mo yung mga tao, dikit-dikit, nagsisiksikan dun sa loob. Lalo na yung mga bata, natutulog sa simento, sa gym. Mainit, mabilis magkasakit, magkahawaan. Di natin ginagawa dapat ito sa kababayan natin. Kasalanan na ito.
And then you said, mahiya naman kayo. Palakpakan ho sila, standing ovation. Pero sino ho nga ho bang pinatutungkalan ninyo dito, Mr. President?
They know who they are. They know who they are. Meron naman dyan talagang mga notorious. Matagal nang ganito ang ginagawa. I'm sorry, but they will have to account for their actions and they will have to account for the expenditures that they have made na hindi natin nakikita kung ano yung naging resulta.
Sa ngayon ho, ito'y warning, ito'y order to conduct an audit, to hold people accountable. Ang tanong ho siguro ngayon, is President Marcos going to crack the whip, really crack the whip on those responsible?
The key thing here is to fix the problem. I always say this, but I'm sure you've heard me say it before. Fix the problem, not the blame. You cannot fix the problem without knowing who to blame.
Yes.
So one thing follows another. So for us to fix the problem, we have to know what happened and where did it go wrong at sinong dapat managot. Meron dapat naman managot dahil sa dinadaanan na hirap na dinadanas ng ating mga kababayan. They have to be told who is responsible and somebody has to answer for their suffering.
Paano ho kung kaalyado ninyo?
Sorry na lang. Hindi na kita kaalyado kung ganyan ang ginagawa mo. Ayaw na kitang kaalyado.
Okay. Naging focus po ninyo dito sa pagpapanagot, yung pag-mention nyo sa SONA, yung flood control projects. Pero in your own words, sir, sabi nyo, alam ng buong madla na may mga kumikickback sa mga government projects. The World Bank puts it at 20%. Yung 20% daw ng annual budget ng Pilipinas na pupunta sa corruption.
Yeah.
How far are you going to take this, sir? Will this also extend to other projects na hindi mga flood control na posibleng kumikickback din ng mga opisyal ng gobyerno?
It has to be evenly applied. Hindi naman maaari, dito lang tayo nag-audit, dito lang tayo naghahanap ng mananagot. Kailangan lahat, kung sino man may naging kasabwat dito sa ganyang klaseng pagtrabaho, sorry na lang, kagaya na sabi ko, sorry na lang.
May calls ho to have a third party conduct this audit, this review of all these projects.
Well,
wag daw po DPWH. What's your take on this?
Hindi talaga. Hindi talaga DPWH. Hiningi lang natin, hindi nang hiningi. Kinuha na natin yung listahan. Kaya yung mahalaga doon sa aming pinag-usapan na isa sa publiko natin. So malalaman ng tao. Yung tiga doon, barangay 1, 2, 3. Sabi, tiga amin yun. Wala naman kami nakitang ganito. Isumbong nila. So that applies to anything. To all of the to all of the projects that will happen. I'm sure marami magsusumbong dyan. We already have some names that are coming up that will be, first of all, corporations that mga contractor na talagang kitang-kita na hindi magandang trabaho nila. So we will put them on a blacklist. Hindi na sila pwedeng magkontrata sa gobyerno. Number two, lahat ito, yun na nga, kakasuhan natin. Sasabihin natin, saan napunta yung pondong ito? Saan napunta sa ganyan? Pag hindi sila makapag-explain na mabuti, we will have to take it to the next step.
Kaugnay po nung utos nyong yan, na i-audit ito mga projects na ito, sinabi nyo rin that you will return a general appropriations bill that is not in line with your NEP.
Yeah.
Never mind if you have to resort to a reenacted budget.
Sure.
Two things, sir. One, this early, Senate President Cheese is saying na hindi pwedeng hindi galawin ng Senado ang budget o ng legislature ang budget. We have the power of the purse.
Yes.
Ano hong masasabi nyo rito?
He's right. Let's remember ko ano yung sinabi ko dun sa suno. Kung hindi alinsunod doon sa plano. Trabaho naman talaga ng Congress yung gagawin nila yung budget. Ngunit trabaho naman namin na magbigay ng plano at humingi ng pondo sa Kongreso para lahat ng ating mga gustong gawin ay ating magagawa at hindi nawawaldas, nananakaw ang pera ng tao. Yun lang naman ang habol namin. But that's the process. The process is the executive, the offices under the executive department make a budget request. It is then transmitted in the NEP to the Congress. Tapos susuriin na ngayon yan. Meron sasabihin, yung mga changes na gano'n.
Ang tinutukoy niyo po yung mga lantarang insertion na tatanggalin dito, lilipat sa ganyan.
Yung pinakamalaking naging problema, yung foreign assisted projects, tinanggal halos lahat ng funding. So, kailangan natin ibalik yun dahil importante yung mga foreign assisted projects. At saka sinisira pati yan ang reputation natin.
Yes.
And the worst part of this all, yung napupunta, kuminsan yung mga project na hindi maganda, napupunta sa unappropriated. Ano yun? Utang yun. Nangungutang tayo para mangrakot itong mga ito. Sobra na yun. Sobra na yun.
Secondly, I said there are 2 points related to this question, sir. Are you prepared to reenact a budget?
Oh, yes.
Hindi na ho siya responsive sa mga plano ng administrasyon ninyo?
Well, yes, I'm willing to reenact the budget if that's what we'll have to do. Since I made it already, I made New Year's Day the hard deadline. I'm sure we will find it. I'm sure we will find a way.
Ito naman ho mga projects natin related to public transportation. Yan, halimbawa pagbibigay ng pagpapaunlad ng ating train systems, mga rails, the EDSA busway, pagpapa-improve ng operations, ng service. Is this a signal of our broader national transport policy na gusto ho natin maging commuter-centric na tayo at hindi na car-centric masyado?
Wala na, I think yung tawag mo car-centric. We've taken it as far as we can. And we've seen examples around the world. Yung mga lugar na talagang sumobra ng traffic dahil lahat ng tao, walang public transport, walang bus, walang tren, walang subway. Eh, syempre lahat kailangan bumili ng sasakyan. Bibili ng motor, bibili ng auto. Kaya nagkaka-traffic ng husto. So that's why we are continuing to make it more efficient. We are continuing to add assets as we learn. Not just additional lines, which was, of course we are doing, pero pati na yung pag-rehabilitate nung tinatawag na dalian cars na hindi nagamit ng gaano katagal mula nung nabili. 10 years old already, hindi pa nagamit. Ngayon pa lamang nagagamit, inayos-ayos, pwede naman palang i-modify para magamit dito sa Pilipinas. So that will be added capacity. Pati mga kalsada, ginagawa natin. Ngayon lang tayo magkakaroon na tayo ng subway. Ngayon pa lang, this is the first time that we have a subway here in the Philippines. These are solutions so that life will be a little easier, so that life will be more convenient, going to work. Ang usually sa planning, dapat ang commute should not be more going to work at saka pag-uwi. Dapat hindi yung one way hindi dapat lumampas sa 1 oras. That's the goal.
Nung nilaunch yung eGov super app sa San Juan,
Yeah.
you were encouraging even the seniors,
Yes.
your fellow seniors,
Yes.
na
Ikaw naman.
madali lang. Madali lang ikanin nyo.
Madali lang talaga.
It's easy to navigate.
Hmm.
Why the push? Kapansin-pansin po yung push ninyo, even yung mga halimbawa, serbisyo ng PhilHealth, naka-link na siya na dapat naka-register ka sa eGov app. Why the push?
Because that's the only way to do it. You cannot operate in 2025 na kinakamay-kamay mong forms, pupunta ka sa opisina, you take 3 days, 3 araw, kasi akala mo tapos na yung dokumento mo, hindi, may kulang pa ito, pumunta ka doon, tapos lalapit na yung fixer sa'yo, the whole experience, the whole bad experience. So, that doesn't work anymore. And if we are to compete as a country, as an economy, kailangan natin makipagsabayan. And look at China, how digitalized China is. We have to be at that level. Look at Singapore. Look at Korea.
Yes.
Ito yung mga karatig bansa natin. These are the people we do business with. So to be able to do business with them properly, we need to digitalize. But digitalization is not only for business, for education. It's absolutely imperative now that children know how to use a computer, they know how to use the internet, and they know how to do work on the internet. Hindi na pwedeng hindi. It's not an option anymore.
And are you satisfied with eGov, the app?
Yes.
Do you actually use it for actual transactions?
Sure.
Kasi halimbawa may mga dati may hotline tayo, tawag kayo, pero walang sumasagot.
Yun, mga ganun.
Ito hong eGov, pwede nyo ba itaya yung pangalan ninyo, gamitin nyo, it works?
Because unang-una, sinasabi, walang sumasagot doon sa telepono. Wala nang tao talaga. Wala nang tao. You don't talk to a person. You just do lahat ng gagawin mo digitally. I made sure, nung sinusulat pa yung code dyan, ang test ko lagi, ang sinasabi ko, kailangan isimple ninyo. Kailangan napakadali. So, tumingin kami, we did a little study. There are 89 million Filipino Facebook users. So sabi ko, dapat yung app natin, yung eGov app natin, kung kaya mo mag-Facebook, kaya mo mag-eGov app. So hindi na kailangan masyadong turuan. What is now, ang kailangan lang natin gawin ngayon ay ipaalam sa tao na may ganito. Huwag na kayong pupunta sa opisina. Kung yung mga nakakatanda, yung mga hindi masyadong sanay sa computer, kahit na grade school, alam na nilang gawin yan. So,
ang naiisip ko halimbawa, this farmer from Tarlac, for example, or Pangasinan, na walang access siguro sa internet o walang access sa mga smartphones. Paano kaya sila?
Matututo sila because tuturuan sila. We will have to educate our people. But again, 89 million, that's a good majority already of Filipinos who can. Halimbawa, may magsasaka, hindi talaga walang pagkateki. Yung anak niya, kaya niya turuan. Kaya siyang turuan. But they have to know that it is available.
So far, pag-uusapan ho natin yung mga nabanggit niyo sa SONA. Punta ako dun sa hindi nyo nabanggit. May mga lawmakers po and advocacy groups who have been urging stricter regulation or even a total ban on online gambling platforms. Andyan ho yung issue ng addiction, financial ruin among the vulnerable sector. Why was the issue of online gambling not included in your SONA?
Because we still have to form the policy on what we are going to do about online gambling. And to this end, I have already started to organize to convene a conference of those who are all the stakeholders. We are talking about marami tayong naririnig from the CBCP. So sama natin sila, mga pare, mga obispo. The parents, of course, are stakeholders here kasi victimized demographic ang mga kabataan. Tapos we have to talk to the people who will, if kung magre-regulate tayo, who will be doing the regulation. The first effect of banning it fully is to put it underground. And then we have no control. Yan talagang wala na tayong regulation.
That was the same argument in banning pogos. Ganon din po yung mga pinapalutang na argument doon. What makes this different?
Because this is not a criminal enterprise. The Pogo itself
Yes.
was not, walang problema.
Yeah. May mga lisensyado. Yes.
At saka yung kung meron online gaming, sige, mag-online gaming. Wala namang pera pumapasok dito sa Pilipinas, nandiyan sa labas lahat. Okay, so no problem. Sinabayan ba naman ng human trafficking, ng credit card scam, kung ano-ano na nangyayari, di ba? Yun ang naging problema. Yun ang naging problema, the illegal part of it. Which I'm glad you asked that question because it brings us to the same situation with online gambling in general. Because we have with online gambling in general, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What we're trying to solve is that hindi malubog sa utang ang wala namang kaya, pero napapasubo dahil sa sugal. Mga bata na natututo magsugal. Let's focus on that. Paano natin patitigilin yan? These are the things that we're going to examine, and we will come up with a plan to make sure that we address the problem. The problem is not online gambling. The problem are the social effects on our children and those who are addicted to gambling.
Puntahan ko naman po, Mr. President.
Mr. President, lately, napansin namin, kaming nag-cover sa inyo, you have been personally gracing and announcing government efforts that provide immediate relief to Filipinos. Most recent of which, ito hong inanunsyo ninyong zero balance billing sa mga government hospitals, benting bigas for larger population, free or discounted fares sa public transport. Ito ho'y well received as expected. And it appears to be working in your favor dahil pataas po ang inyong mga numbers, trust and approval numbers. Ito ho ba'y paraan to win back people's trust and approval? Ito ang ginagawa ninyo?
Hindi ganun ang approach na. We don't work according to surveys, not really. What we do is, is there a way, pag may nagre-reklamo, sinasabi, mahabang pila sa PhilHealth, anong pwede natin gawin para mas maginhawa? Yung mga seniors na kailangan tulungan natin, o sige, bigyan natin ng diskwento dun sa mga sa mga tren. O tapos yung commuters, kasi araw-araw yan eh. So, anything that we can do to make things easier, kahit na hindi discount, yung digitalization nga sa PhilHealth para hindi ora-oradang nakapila ang tao para makapag-claim lamang. So, all of these things are being done because we have many big plans, malaking proyekto na ginagawa natin na it will take matagal pa yan. Nasisimulan pa lang. Matatagalan pa yan. Ngunit, there are many things that we can do that affect people's lives and help people's life, make it more easy, cheaper, easier, more convenient, save time, all of those things that are valuable to all of us. Pagka meron kami nakitang ginagawa, yun ang ginagawa namin. It's not really to try and do anything. The other thing is that hindi sapat yung aming pagbalita sa tao kung ano yung mga bagong serbisyo na nalaan na. Kaya ngayon, sinasabi namin, and it's important na nandoon ako because when the President goes, it highlights whatever that is. Like today, we started the Bayanihan Estero program, which is cleaning up the esteros. Ngayon, na nandun ako, siyempre, lalabas sa news yan, lalabas sa dyaryo, alam ng tao na may ganun. So, they can volunteer, they can help in any way that they can, that kind of thing. Or, may pasyente wants to go to the hospital, ngayon, alam na nila, ngayon, dati hindi nila, paano ba yung PhilHealth na yan? Ano ba yung mga, ngayon, alam na nila, kaya hindi na sila mag-hesitate na pupunta.
How do you respond to observations that ito raw ay mga short-term band-aid o papogi but hindi raw ho ito, they do not really provide meaningful improvement in people's lives?
Well, ask the student who now pays 50% less for his pamasahe. Ask the patient who now is willing to go under a kidney transplant because yung gamot na inaalala niya hindi niya mabibili pagka nagpa-transplant siya. Maraming gamot yan medyo mahal pa. Libre na, hindi na siya pupunta na siya, itutuloy na niya. Those are the problems.
Yes.
And we are slowly solving them.
Halimbawa ho yung sa bigas, halimbawa. Instead of subsidizing, bakit hindi pababain ang farm inputs or make it easier for farmers to produce more para mapababa, things like that. Yung mga ganong observations.
And that is why we have, in the last planting seasons, have recorded all bumper crops pataas ng pataas because inayos nga natin ang production. Ang katotohanan, gamitin na nga natin yung bigas bilang halimbawa. Yung 20 piso, ngayon lang namin nagawa dahil ang dami munang kailangan ayusin. Kailangan bawasan yung smuggling. Kailangan isara yung mga warehouse na nag-hoarding. Kailangan magbigyan tayo ng makinarya para sa farmers. Kailangan magbigay nga tayo ng tulong sa mga farmers. Kailangan natin maibigay yung CLOA para dun sa agrarian reform. Hindi pa nagawa nung bago kaming upo, wala pa lahat yan. So, sa nakaraang 3 taon, ginagawa na ngayon namin. Ngayon may kakayahan na tayo.
But we're still heavily subsidizing the benting bigas.
It should not be that heavily subsidized. In fact,
So liliit po ang subsidy in the coming
it
years?
should come habang yung production natin gumaganda. Bababa ng bababa yan. But we got to naabot na natin yung punto na masabi natin, kaya na natin ito. We can afford it. We can afford the subsidy. And as that subsidy, as the subsidy becomes less and less, mas magiging malaki ang coverage ng 20 pesos.
Ito, nabanggit natin yung zero balance billing kanina, tumbenting bigas. Marami din ho kayo mga binanggit sa zona ninyo na pangako that you intend to do in the next 3 years of your term. New classrooms, bulilit centers, all other projects.
Sure.
Tanong po ng tao, Mr. President, may pera pa po ba ang Pilipinas para tustusan lahat ito?
Oo, meron. Basta't yung pera ng Pilipinas ay ginagamit sa tamang paraan. Yung perang nakalaan para sa classroom, ginamit talaga sa classroom. Hindi nakalagay doon 2 classroom, ginawa lang 1 classroom. Binulsa na yung natira. Yung mga ganong klase. Pag talagang mahigpit tayo at tama ang gamit ng ating pondo, meron tayo.
Uutangin ba natin ang pantusto sa mga proyekto? Because right now, 17.2 trillion, to many Filipinos, normal naman po may utang sa mga tao, but the number 17 trillion is staggering. Nakakatakot.
Yeah, but even if you look at the sari-sari store, isang maliit na negosyo, may utang din. Pero may kinikita. Tapos yung utang na yun, ginagamit pang investment para palakihin ang negosyo, para pagandahin yung whatever, restaurant or sari-sari, whatever it is. Huwag natin tinitignan yun lang trillion.
As an absolute number.
It's not an absolute number. Like any corporation, may balance sheet yan. The balance sheet has assets and liabilities. Pag tinitignan lamang yung utang, tinitignan lang yung liabilities. Tingnan nyo yung asset. Nadadagdagan yung asset natin. Nadadagdagan yung training natin na ibibigay sa pinakamalaking asset natin, Pilipino, yung manggagawang Pilipino. So yung utang na yun, gagamitin mo na para pang-training doon sa tao yun. Anong balik nun? Ang balik nun in employment. At saka employment sa magandang trabaho, hindi yung mga basta-basta na trabaho. Ito yung talagang magandang
Tama rin po ba na ang pag-manage natin sa national debt is contingent on how we are able to combat corruption? Nabanggit niyo kanina kasi, umuutang tayo na ninanakaw lang nila. Kung mapigilan po natin yun, mapapababa utang ng Pilipinas.
Dahan-dahan, mapapababa natin yan. Slowly we'll bring it down.
Kahapon ho, nag-anunsyo ang SSS na magkakaroon ng dagdag sa pensyon. Ang sabi po ng SSS, it will not necessitate additional contributions, but it will slightly shorten the fund life of SSS. How will this work, sir?
Well, that's fine. Because the SSS is growing anyway. Our population is growing. Our working population is growing. So yun ang bawi doon. It will continue to grow. In fact, in our estimation, SSS, in terms of its fund, is growing at such a rate that it will be bigger than GSIS soon.
Okay.
Simulan ko na po, Mr. President,
Yes,
with my
please.
first question on your recent SONA.
Okay.
Isa ho sa pinakapinalakpakan doon nung sabihin ninyong pananagutin ninyo,
Okay. That is the first part po. Magpupunta na tayo sa pakikipag-ugnayan niya sa mga reporter sa Kapihan. Okay? Okay. Sandali lang po. Okay. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Philippine press, welcome to the Kapihan India version. The president will issue a short statement, then we'll follow up with your questions.
Well, we have come to the end of the state visit, my state visit here to India. And I must say, I'm very, very encouraged by the exchanges that we have made, both with the government of Prime Minister Modi and of President Murmu, but also the exchanges and the discussions that we have initiated between business leaders of India and of the Philippines. And what really we discovered as we went along in our discussions, that the more we looked, the more we found. In other words, the more we discussed what are the possible areas of cooperation, the more areas of cooperation that we found. Sasabihin natin, we talked about agri. Pag pinag-usapan yung agri, napupunta yung usapan sa digital. Pag napag-usapan yung digital, napapag-usapan ang defense and security. It really just the whole range of possibilities has now become clear to us. And that's why, in my view, we should look at this visit as just as a new beginning in terms of the relationship between India and the Philippines. India and the Philippines have always had a very good, very amicable relations for the last 70 plus years. And however, we have not engaged each other aggressively in terms of trade, in terms of all the other, in terms of supplies, the supply chains, in terms of developing several industries. But now we will, and that is why one of the reasons why we came here was simply to open those channels, and I think that's we have achieved that. And like I said, in the attempt to open some of the channels, like in terms of medicine, in terms of digital space, in terms of training, maritime cooperation and all that, lahat yan, palagay ko yung aming pagpasok, sabi, ito yung mga pwede natin gawin. Ngunit nung nasimula namin yung pag-usapan yung mga yan, nakita namin mas marami pa palang pwede. Kaya hindi ako magugulat kung ang mga susunod na buwan ay magdadatingan dito mga Philippine businessmen at pati na ang mga iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas. Kaya I am very, very pleased with this visit. I am very happy with the results. And I am very glad that we have opened these new lines of communications with India. And I'm sure that this will be to the benefit of both our countries. All right, so let me open the,
Mr. President, the
yield
first
the
question
floor.
will be coming from Kenneth, PTV4.
Mike.
Hi, sir. Good morning. Sir, you have mentioned that you had a bilateral meeting with President Murmu.
Yeah.
Sir, ano po yung mga specific na napag-usapan po ninyo at paano nyo po ito nakikita na makatutulong po sa pagpapatibay pa ng relasyon ng Pilipinas at India?
Well, most of the detailed discussions, karamihan ng yung usapan na medyo detalyado was with the Prime Minister. ang talagang pinakiusap ko sa Pangulo, Murmo, ay kailangan ko yung I asked her, we need your support. And these are the areas that we are interested in, that we are going to pursue. And we need her support as president. Hindi naman rubber stamp ang presidente. Kailangan na aprubahan din niya lahat ng mga ating nais na gawin. So that was the essence of it. We spoke in general terms, but because by the time I met with the president, by the time I met her, we had already had some discussions. So may resulta na ng konti. At sabi ko na nga sa kanya, ito yung mga aming nais gawin, ngunit kailangan namin ng suporta mo. And she agreed. She says this is good for both our countries. Thank you.
Arlene from ABS-CBN.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Mr. President, may we know how much or any figure, kung ilan yung pledges or investments na may uwi po sa Pilipinas, or any ballpark figure on how many jobs can be potentially generated from these?
Well, in terms of actual total direct investment, we have already secured $446 million in terms of actual direct investment. But that is already what we have decided at the end of this trip. Pero marami pang papasok dyan. Hindi pa yan, kagaya ng aking nasabi, simula pa lang yan. And we are hoping that we have generated interest in several other areas. At kung yung estimate lang namin dyan, with the several other areas, is the potential for investment of about $5.7 billion. So malaking bagay talaga. India is a very, very strong economy. India is the 4th largest economy in the world, and with the prospect of very soon becoming the 3rd largest economy in the world. Kaya talagang napaka-aktibo yung kanilang ekonomiya. And, we see that they have a very strong instinct for progress, for development, especially in the digital area.
Next question, Mr. President, from Kathy from Manila Times.
Good morning, Mr. President. Can we get your statement on the recent launch po ng China's rocket near Palawan? May mga expert po na nagsasabi that if open po ba tayo sa filing of another case against China before an international tribunal? And ano po yung ating next legal step kung sakali po?
Well, it's not the first time that this has happened. And actually, if you look at the incidents, they did not commit any violations. There have been no casualties. We just wish that perhaps they could warn us a little earlier so that we know that the path of the rocket, where the path is, and kung magbibitaw sila ng stages kung saan babagsak. And I remember in my trip to Beijing early on that I told President Xi, we have no interest in your rockets. You just tell us where they will land. We'll collect it and give it to you. And that's continues to be my offer to China. I said, kailangan agawin sa amin yan. Wala kang anong gagawin namin dyan. So, sabihan nyo kami kung saan dadaan yung rocket. Pag may babagsak, kukunin namin sa dagat. Tapos idadali namin sa inyo. Wala namang problema. But the good side to all of this, wala namang casualty. Wala namang tinamaan. Hindi naman nagka-problema.
Next question from Daryl Esguerra from PNA, Mr. President.
Good morning, Mr. President. Sir, baka can you provide lang po details sa naging usapan nyo ni Prime Minister Modi, particularly sa defense po. Are there plans to pursue a more formal security cooperation framework like joint production, intelligence sharing, or possibly baka PFAs? Sir, baka
yes, definitely there's a commitment for India to have a larger profile in terms of the West Philippine Sea. And nung umalis tayo sa Maynila, meron ng exercises, dalawang vessel ng India at saka dalawang vessel ng Pilipinas. tuloy-tuloy naman yan. At, we agreed that we should do more of it. And India has already made the policy decision to have more of a presence in the region. Because ngayon, kaya nga dati pinag-uusapan lang natin Asia Pacific, ang pinag-uusapan ngayon natin Indo-Pacific. Kaya't lahat ng bansa na pumapaligid sa Indo-Pacific, na kasama sa area na yan, ay dapat talagang magkaroon ng mga cooperasyon in many ways. And we should not ever limit ourselves to just defense and security, because the economy plays a part in defense and security. So pagpatibay din ng mga ekonomiya natin, pagpalakas ng ating trade, pagpaganda ng ating relasyon, kasama lahat yan. Defense and security is only one dimension to the entire problem. So we try to focus on everything, not just one aspect of the situation. But yes, the short answer to your question is yes. There is we have committed to more exercises together, and not only bilaterally, but also, of course, multilaterally with other countries as well.
Next question, Mr. President, from Julie Baisa, 1PH.
Good morning,
Hi,
sir.
Nigel.
Sir, can we ask your thoughts or reaction doon sa Senate's decision to archive the articles of impeachment against VP Sara? One of the framers po ng 1987 Constitution, si Attorney Christian Monsod, said it amounts to a dismissal. And you've mentioned, sir,
It amounts to?
a dismissal
No.
po.
That let me clarify that. The merits of the case were not examined by the Supreme Court. This doesn't mean this does not decide the merits of the case. It just talked about procedure. So the procedure was faulty, was lacking. So yun ang assessment ng Supreme Court. It has no bearing on the rightness or wrongness of the impeachment case.
And your reaction, sir, dun sa naging pagboto po ng Senado to archive? Nasabi niyo, sir, ano kayo? Interested observer po kayo.
Kaya nga, so I've observed that they voted in, that's it. I keep telling you, the executive has no role in this. The president has no role. I'm an impeachable officer. I cannot involve myself in any of this. So, well, it's really the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the House. So yun ang kanilang. That's where the decisions were made. Well, on the issues between the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has decided, and like I've said, that's it. That's the Supreme Court has decided.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question from Eden of Net25.
Mr. President, good morning po.
Good morning.
Mahirap pala ang modyo. Ito po. Reaction lang po ng Malacanang dun po sa GSIS investment po sa isang online game gambling, yung DG Plus daw. Paano po, pero nalugi yung kanilang investment. Isa po ba ito sa mga factor kung bakit may apprehension ang government?
No, nothing. I didn't even know about that. Hindi ko alam na may ganun yung GSIS. But no, the revenue side of it is simply not a part of the discussion. Of course, we use that revenue that we are collecting, but that's not really the main point. The complaint against any of these activities is really the social cost. So yan ang pag-aralan natin na mabuti. That is why we are organizing I don't know what you call them. Internally, we're calling it a conclave. To put all of the interested parties, such as of course CBCP has been very vocal on their position, so they must be heard. Then we have to hear about from experts on addiction. We have to hear from parents and from teachers as to what the effects are on children. We have to hear from the police what are the effects in terms of criminality. And we really have to examine what are the options. Ano ba talagang policy natin dapat gawin dito sa illegal gambling? Because it's not that simple. Ang nagiging sigaw lagi, ban this, ban. Ganito, example lang. Ano ang nangyari sa Isabong? Binan natin. Natigil ba? Magkano ang pusta sa Isabong? 50 centimos. So, lahat talaga nadadamay. So, let's use that as an example. Successful ba yung pagban natin sa Isabong? Kung hindi, bakit hindi naging successful? Yun ang mga kailangan natin pag-aralan. Eh ngayon, since nakita natin na nagka-problema, paano natin ayusin yung problema? Ang solusyon ba ay mag-ban o iba yung gagawin natin? Yun ang question ngayon. Ano yung gagawin natin? Kung hindi ban, ano yung gagawin natin? That's what I'm hoping all of these different sectors of society will lead us to a good answer. Siyempre, pakikinggan din natin yung pagko, magkano yung kinikita nila, pakikinggan natin lahat. But all of that, we have to hear from everyone because it's not a simple, in my view, ako lang I don't want to influence anyone's opinion here until we hear from the group who will be examining the question. But in my opinion, ban will not take care of the problem. We have to be a little bit more measured in our response.
So sa ngayon po, Mr. President, wala pa pong plano ang gobyerno na magpatupad ng total ban sa illegal gambling, despite the fact po na yung illegal gambling ay nakaka-addict gaya po ng illegal drugs at nakakasira po ng pamilya.
That's the thing. What is the problem? Is the problem online gambling? Or is the problem na addict ang tao o nadadamay at natuturuan ng mga bata na magsugal? That's the problem. So let's solve that problem. You know, ang nagiging online gaming is evil. Hindi naman, okay, di ban natin. Hindi ba? Ganun, nandun ang usapan ngayon when it comes to online gaming. Pero hindi naman, kailangan talaga may tendency kuminsan tayo dito sa atin. Pagka may problem, ban. It's not necessarily the solution. Maybe it is. Baka pagkatapos ng usapan nila, sasabihin, kailangan talaga i-ban. Di ban. Pero pag-aralan natin na mabuti. Huwag tayong basta pabigla-bigla yung tinatawag. We have to be measured in our responses. If it comes down to a ban, then we will ban. But if there are better solutions than a ban, we will take those on.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question will be from Chanel, DCXL.
Good morning po, Mr. President. According to COMELEC po, wala na daw pong formal signing for the bill postponing the barangay and sangguniang kabataan elections, and that you will instead allow it to lapse into law on August 14. But on your part, sir, have you reached a decision on whether to sign the bill or let the bill?
No, I'll sign it. I'll sign it.
What are the main factors po you weigh before deciding?
Because we are facing one of the biggest elements here, kakatapos lang natin ng malaking eleksyon, midterm election. Susunod na rito yung BARM. Isasabay pa natin ngayon yung barangay. Masyado ang COMELEC actually nagsasabi hindi namin kaya dahil ang hindi naman ang kailangan nating tutukan yung BARM. You have to remember the BARM election that is upcoming in October is the first time we have ever had this kind of election at all. At all. Sa buong kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, hindi pa nagkaroon ng BARM parliament na hinalal ng tao. So, that is why it is so important. And if that election fails, malaking bagay, malaking failure yan dun sa peace process. Kaya't kailangan maging matagumpay ang pagganap ng halalan ng BARM. And that's why we really are focusing on that. And again, the local officials are saying we just finished a local election. Magkakaroon na naman tayo ng barangay election. Parang ganun din. Halos ganun din. So we with a view on the Supreme Court decision that we cannot shorten the term of the barangay officials, we are actually lengthening the term of the barangay officials, so that's not in conflict. So I think the most sensible, the most common sense solution is to postpone.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. The next question will be from Jean from Philippine Star.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You've declared a hardline approach against corruption, even against allies. And impeachment developments aside, how can people still be confident in our accountability mechanisms given all the political noise?
Again, there has been no trial. So the merits of the case have not been examined, tried, adjudicated, argued, discussed. So accountability just doesn't come into it. People have to understand, it is a procedural question. Sinabi, mali yung date, hindi tama ang pagkagawa ng House. Walang kinalaman doon sa laman ng impeachment complaint. Kung hindi, kung paano yung pagka-handle ng impeachment complaint.
Sir, how would you address her standing corruption allegations?
I'm sorry?
How would you address her standing corruption allegations?
Those corruption allegations?
Outside.
Well, we have already COA, we have already all of this. I'm sure the House and the Senate will start to conduct further investigations on this because it's really within their purview. So we have all of the mechanisms that are available to us in terms of checks and balances. All we have to do is to try and get some answers. That's it. We have to make very, very clear to everyone that the Supreme Court decision does not have any bearing on the rightness or wrongness of the merits of the impeachment case. They're not saying that there was no wrongdoing. Neither are they saying that there was wrongdoing. All they're saying is that you did not handle it properly. That's it. Then that's why accountability just doesn't come into it here. It's an entirely highly tangential matter. It is not a central point in the discussion. Yeah. May importante na maliwanag sa tao yun. Kasi sinasabi, yung the natural reaction, hindi ka abogado. Hindi mo sasabihin mo. Sabi ng Supreme Court, hindi talaga totoo. Wala namang ginawang mali pala. Hindi yun ang sinabi ng Supreme Court. Ang sinabi ng Supreme Court, hindi tama yung pagkahawak ninyo sa House, ang pagkahawak ninyo doon sa impeachment complaint. Yun lang. So, accountability doesn't come into it. It does not question our accountability whatsoever. Ang COA nandyan, they can examine all of this, and much of this will be, I'm sure, because we are coming up to the budget process. Palagay ko, maglalabasan na naman lahat yan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have two more questions, Mr. President.
Yeah, sure.
The next one will be from Richmond, from Daily Tribune.
Good morning, sir. You previously mentioned about strengthening the semiconductor industry, and India is being considered as a manufacturing hub, as well for these products. India, sir.
India is not a big semiconductor.
No, sir.
Malakas sila sa digital talaga, pero hindi sa they are very, very they are leaders in many aspects of the digital space. But meron silang production ng semiconductor, pero hindi sila major player when it comes to semiconductor production.
Sir, to clarify about the production of the mobile phones, they are some products that have grown popular brands now are being made in India, yung mga mobile phones, sir. So with this, sir, is the Philippines seeing a deeper cooperation for this sector, especially now that we have elevated into a strategic partnership?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly correct. The strategic partnership provides us a basis now of having more engagements. But the engagements that we that we are really exploring are in analytics, IT. There was even a proposal for additional towers. You know, we have the Common Towers program. May kumpanya na lumapit sa atin na nais tumulong. Magtatayo sila yun lang ang trabaho nila. Magtatayo sila ng tower para tulungan yung programa natin mapabilis. So these are the entire range, the entire gamut of activities that fall under digital activity we explored, and certainly marami talaga because we talked about AI, we talked about even training, because magaling sila dito sa India. Magaling sila, marami silang napoproduce na very well trained, na pwede talagang makipagkompetensya sa labor market, who we can take on and who will help us in our digitalization. So malaking bagay sa pinag-usapan namin yung digital. Malaking AI, we talked about AI, about telecom, about IT. Ang magaling talaga sila dyan. World leader sila sa ganyan. Kaya napakalaking bagay kung mapalalim natin yung diskusyon natin with India when it comes to those. Eventually, to bring those technologies to the Philippines. And which is always something, yung transfer of technology, siyempre. At saka yung mag-training. So yun ang inuna namin. Baka pwede kami padala ng tao dito sa mga institute ninyo. Tapos pagka medyo marami na kayong naturuan, pumunta naman kayo doon para tignan ninyo yung sistema namin and what are your suggestions to make it better. That's what I was saying, is that the more we look, the more we found. Yung pagka yun lang yung sa digital, sabi, pwede natin gawin to. Hindi, pwede pa rin ito, pwede pa. Ang dami talagang pwede. And India is very ambitious when it comes to the digital space. So it's good to see. It was very, very important for us to see. Ano yung direksyon nila? Ano sa assessment nila papunta ang AI? Saan pupunta ba yan? Ano ba yung ano ba yung mga kailangan nating gawin? Because like we keep hearing AI is a very powerful tool, but you know, like any powerful tool, it cuts both ways, right? So paano natin babantayan yan? How do we all of these things, cybersecurity na pag-usapan natin. Siyempre napupunta na rin sa defense and security, pero but that's not necessarily for the armed forces. It's also for the banks, businesses, the government. Ayun, kailangan natin yung cybersecurity kasi nandun talagang frontline ngayon. And being, as I said, a world leader, India has a lot to offer in terms of experience, in terms of training, in terms of all of the things that we in the Philippines need to develop our own digital space. Is the phrase that I always use now. Is we need to develop that, and we can see how to handle, for example, how do you handle AI? Kasi nga siyempre alam natin lahat yung good side. Alam natin, pero yung merong medyo not so good side, right? So how do we handle that? How do we work around that? And then not only in the business field, but also in the political field. What is social media? Where is it headed? How do we deal with it? What misinformation, disinformation, fake news, all of that. How do we deal with that? What are there methods that we can use? Maraming bagay talaga, sobra. Yeah, like I say, ang dami talagang pwedeng gawin with India. There really is. And what was going in my head every time that I was talking to people, I said, why did we do this earlier? We should have done this earlier. But I'm happy that we did it now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the last question will be from Salima Refran from GMA 7.
Hi, sir.
Hello.
Magandang umaga po. Sir, you mentioned kanina na may mga bagay dito sa impeachment po na kailangan maging maliwanag sa atin pong publiko. Ang nangyayari po kasi yung napapakinggan ay yung iba't ibang panig. Have you spoken or have they reached out to you at the very least, yung mga allies po ninyo or anybody dito sa sitwasyon na ito? Kasi nga medyo humahaba na po siya.
Na mahaba ang
Yung usapin, sir, sa impeachment, maraming kailangan ipaliwanag. You mentioned it already kanina po.
No, no, in my case, well, siyempre may nung tatanong sa akin, sasabihin, sorry, problema nyo yan. Hindi ako nanghihiram ng problema. That's your problem. That's again, that situation does not really involve me. It would be highly improper for me to tell my friends who are in the Senate and who are in the House na ito yung dapat ninyong gawin. Highly improper yun. Pati na ako, ma-impeach kung gagawin ko yun. Hindi ko gagawin yun. So yes, they ask, and we talk about it, but it's not as if I try to direct their actions. That's the last thing I want to do. Besides, when this all started, I immediately came to the conclusion, I have no part in this. So we'll just continue doing our work. And then, mukhang tapos na. Ewan ko kung mag-MR pa ang House. Meron na. Oh, yun. Well, then the process will continue. Pabayaan natin. But if the Senate has decided not to try the case, I don't know. Even if the Supreme Court reverses itself, I don't know where that will put the whole thing. I don't really worry about it too much for myself. I just need to. There's so many things we need to do that I don't have. Those are my priorities. Not this.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. President. On that note, we conclude today's Kapihan. Maraming salamat, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next po yung speech niya sa India. Okay? Okay.
President, if I can invite you from that side, and Mr. Joshi, you can join us from here. Thank you so much. If I can request everyone to please take their seats. We'll commence the evening with a welcome address by Mr. Sanjoy Joshi, Chairman at the Observer Research Foundation. Sir.
Excellency Ferdinand Romualdo Marcos Jr., President of the Philippines, and we're very pleased to have First Lady Madame Luis Arneta Marcos with us today. Ministers in our midst, delegates, part of the delegation from Philippines, dignitaries and experts from the strategic community, a very warm welcome to all of you. We gather here today as the Indo-Pacific braces for yet another realignment. Perhaps its most profound since the end of the Second World War. The certainties of the past have dissolved. Supply chains are looking very, very brittle from what they did 10 years ago. And the very foundations of the rules-based system painstakingly built over the debris of the Second World War, those foundations are being tested by the tides of geopolitics. As a constant, within the traditional Indian worldview, you would call a time like this a time when the Pacific and the Indian Oceans are undergoing what we say is a Samudra Mantham, a process of churn, the big churn. And these are also, in the traditional Indian way of thinking, these are moments of creative destruction. Times when the world needs very skilled navigators who understand the importance of balance, leaders who can recognize and reject the false binaries which surround us everywhere, who understand the difference between development and sovereignty, and reject the false binaries between the East and the West, the North and the South. We need leaders who understand the importance of harmony. And since we have an aficionado of music in our midst, and a practitioner for music, President Marcos, right to the ears, Bong Bong Marcos, as he's popularly known. That is why I'm going to use a lot of musical metaphors in my speech. So we need leaders who can understand that delicate musical balance, which can amplify the tiniest of sovereign voices, raise them, not drown them out, and make them heard loud and clear. And it is therefore my distinct privilege today to welcome a statesman who practices this equilibrium, His Excellency, President of the Republic of Philippines. So in your State of the Nation address last Monday, you clearly spelled out that Philippines' foreign policy as an independent nation and a country that is a friend to all and an enemy to none. And for India and the Philippines, as Prime Minister Modi remarked, we are friends by choice and partners by destiny. As maritime democracies straddling Asia's most critical oceans, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Yes, geography is our destiny. Yet our greatest shared challenge transcends the territorial disputes in our neighborhoods. The bigger challenge is not those. The bigger challenge is the erosion of trust. The erosion of trust in multilateral institutions which set down the rules, the laws. Both our nations face unprecedented pressure on our maritime domains, whether at Scarborough Shoal or across the Andaman Sea. Yet our response must transcend reactive nationalism. The Philippines' unwavering adherence to the 2016 Arbitral Award under UNCLOS and India's principal support demonstrates how law must anchor power. A principle ASEAN has championed for generations. And today's address, shifting Indo-Pacific ties, Philippines and India as cross-sea partners for a rules-based order, speaks to the very heart of our shared challenge. Now, His Excellency arrives here, yes, as the President of Philippines, but more importantly, Philippines is today getting ready to take over the presidency of ASEAN in 2026 and becomes the steward of ASEAN centrality. And this is, I think, a time when ASEAN itself, that very understated force in the region, actually remains the best hope for rebuilding a fractured international order. As China recalibrates its ambitions, US commitments fluctuate, ASEAN retains the indispensable convening power born out of neutrality that certainly is not passivity. But rather it is one of those strategic fora where I think norms for the future can perhaps be reforged. And under President Marcos' stewardship, the 2026 chairmanship offers at this point of time a historic moment to recenter multilateralism. Yesterday, just a day after the Indian and the Philippines Navy concluded 2 days of joint exercises near the Scarborough Shoal, the two countries signed a slew of agreements, including a declaration of establishing a strategic partnership. Ours is not just a rapidly evolving bilateral relationship, but a partnership that believes in architecting a polycentric regional order where middle powers like ours sustain balance. Now, how can India and Philippines work together to rebuild the cross-sea equilibrium? Very important. So our defense and security collaborations, whether it is the exercises or the BrahMos missile deal, they aren't just about defense capability, but they are symbols more of sovereign choice, where one can become a trusted partner of the other, and each exercises strategic agency beyond traditional patrons. This is the ASEAN way, diversification seen as resilience. And a maritime cooperation near the Scarborough Shoal also is more about confidence building within ASEAN's normative framework for peace and stability. And the next question is, can ASEAN's FTAs, India's new trade pacts, form the scaffolding for a rules-based resilience as tariff walls erode the established economic order? So you lead a nation at the fulcrum of the Indo-Pacific, and lead it with the wisdom to know that lasting security comes not from dominance, but from balance. And that power, if power is checked, rules are upheld, and the smallest voice retains its dignity in the concert of nations, we have done something good. I recall, sir, you had shortly after assuming office in an interview with the Straits Times likened the Philippines' foreign policy to a band where every instrument matters and where you need the bass player to anchor, not to dominate. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to invite President Bongbong Marcos, a leader whose attitude mirrors that deep, essential musical ethos, deep, steady, essential, and one who knows that in geopolitics, as in jazz, what goes unsupported collapses. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Chairman Sunjoy Joshi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The First Lady and I are elated to be visiting this great country, a close friend and vital partner of the Philippines, upon the gracious invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As President of the Philippines, Asia's oldest republic, it is indeed an honor to visit the world's largest democracy. Before I proceed, allow me to express my deepest sympathy to the Indian nation, especially to those bereaved who lost loved ones in the tragic flash floods in Uttarakhand yesterday. Over the past 2 days, I paid my respects to the Mahatma, father of this nation, whose powerful ideas continue to resonate the world over and continue to guide our lives. I had insightful discussions with your president and, of course, with Prime Minister Modi and other eminent officials. I reiterated to them our abiding support and solidarity in confronting terrorism and our grief over innocent lives lost to this scourge. We discussed our cooperation in defense and security, and more importantly, we charted the direction of our future-looking engagement. I explored with the captains of Indian businesses a path towards mutual growth in what is, by many measures, still very much a blue ocean of opportunities between the Philippines and India. Through the Indian media, I engaged in conversation with the broader public on their perceptions and queries on the rising prominence and relevance of our ties. From tomorrow, our sojourn takes us to India's Garden City and the Silicon Valley of Bengaluru to further our economic agenda. This opportunity to share further reflections is the most fitting way to conclude the Delhi leg of this visit. On the centuries-old and enduring friendship of the Philippines and the Indian peoples, the state of our Indo-Pacific region, and its complex challenges and uncertainties against which we must, as nations and as partners, propel forward. I therefore wholeheartedly thank Chair Joshi and ORF for hosting us for this gathering this evening. Friends, this state visit is occasioned by our commemoration of 75 years of diplomatic relations. Yet, the ties that bind our two nations extend much further back in time. Our histories are intertwined. Southeast Asia is India's next door neighbor, but the Philippine archipelago lies at its far end, bordering on the Pacific. And yet, our civilizations bridge this chasm. Despite this distance, the Philippines archipelago was touched by the Indosphere. More than artifacts, this influence was of the intangible kind, ideas that seeped into our worldview. A Maranao version of the Ramayana called the Maharaja Lawana, and Sanskrit-derived words that to this day roll off Filipino tongues. The British occupation of Manila lasted all but 18 months. But that expedition's Madras infantrymen stayed behind. They are progenitors of a vibrant circle of Filipino-Indian families in Metro Manila's eastern reaches. And speaking of linguistic influences, my father always used to sum up the history or describe the history of the Filipino people in one word, tadhana, Filipino for history or destiny. Auspiciously, it is believed to be related, if not rooted, in the Sanskrit sandhana, a term that denotes both journey and unity. Both sandhana and tadhana, a shared journey and destiny, capture the story of the friendship between our two countries. We see this in our similar experiences as peoples that went through colonial subjugation and through tenacious struggles won independence. It was there when Philippines and India, at the very infancy of our statehoods, became two of only 3 Asian nations in San Francisco that labored to establish the United Nations. This journey and vision imbued the pivotal conferences in New Delhi in 1947 and Baguio in 1950 to forge our Pan-Asian solidarity. And 5 years later, we converged in Bandung to define the rallying creed of the global South. The Cold War would see our strategic outlooks diverge as we acted on our respective realities and security environments. The Philippines found security in alliances, while India chose the path of non-alignment. In that extended period, we embarked on our parallel and respective paths towards attaining our national aspirations and cultivating our international standing. Today, in a far different and indisputably multimodal world, our respective journeys converge once again. We remain bastions of democracy, but this time, we are also amongst the most ascendant economies. The Philippines is on the cusp of upper middle income status, attainable as early as next year. India, of course, can be proud of your spectacular rise under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and the intellectual gravitas, innate talent, and industry of Indian people, rising to become the world's 4th largest economy and the country wielding enormous global influence. As an emerging middle power, the Philippines is likewise determined to be a force for good. What has this meant for our ties? A reconvergence, one of such proportions that the Philippines and India are interacting, collaborating at levels and scopes not seen before. Since 2023, our trade has breached and consistently exceeded the $3 billion mark. Our functional and development cooperation has turned multifaceted, spanning health, tourism, agriculture, financial technology, science and technology, education, maritime security, even space. We now reinforce each other's strengths very concretely by our defense cooperation, of which the BrahMos project is by far the largest. But this intensification is not confined to supporting bilateral aspirations. Our mutually supportive approaches also find expression in cooperation on shared geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges. It is the same reconvergence and alignment of interest that led Prime Minister Modi and me to Hyderabad House yesterday to inaugurate the Philippines-India Strategic Partnership. There may be an impression in some circles that strategic partnerships have become common currency in international diplomacy and national toolkits. Not so for the Philippines. We approach the forging of such relationships with great deliberation, less of caution, but more of adherence to a very high standard. The standards that uphold mutual and strategic trust, a common cause, a clear alignment of interests, and indeed a track record of being responsible players in the international arena and the global commons. Well, India has emerged as one of the countries with the Philippines, which the Philippines finds these sterling qualities. Our strategic partnership with India is only our fifth such partnership. After Japan, Vietnam, Australia, and the Republic of Korea, sea lines of communications crisscross the Indian Ocean. Maritime trade to and from the Far East and the Pacific through the Indian Ocean has and continues to underpin our prosperity and our people's aspirations for the last centuries. Safe navigation and security are important, especially for Filipino and Indian seafarers who are on almost every ship plying these historic and strategic routes. I again thank the Indian people and the brave men and women of the Navy, of your Navy through Prime Minister Modi, for the kind rescue and succor of our nationals in 2024 after they were attacked by Houthi rebels. We recognize India's influence and first responder role in this critical area. We welcome our new strategic partner, India, then a crown jewel for an empire, and now the key to unlock a free and open Indo-Pacific. As two of Asia's biggest democracies with a deep historical linkage, the Philippines and India should transform our natural friendship into a robust and modern partnership. This is but the natural progression of things. Just yesterday, a flotilla of 3 ships from India's Eastern Naval Command, including the guided missile destroyer INS Delhi, accompanied by tankers INS Shakti and corvette INS Kiltan, joined 2 frigates from the Philippines, BRP Miguel Malvar and BRP Jose Rizal, and completed their first ever maritime cooperative activities in the South China Sea and in the West Philippine Sea. It attests to our shared determination to work for the greater good in a way that protects our trade and our prosperity, our freedoms, and the heritage for future generations. Our relations with India form part of a larger lattice work of partnerships, of formal alliance, strategic partnership, a minilateral groupings that we have built in recent years with and amongst the states that share specific interests. All these build into pillars that support the architecture of regional stability and guarantee the preservation of prosperity. They reflect the value that we put in investing in diplomacy, even as we steadily ramp up and modernize our defense capabilities, undergirded by our comprehensive archipelagic defense concept to project our forces into areas where we must, by constitutional duty and legal right, and we must protect our interests and preserve our patrimony. These we all pursue, even as we remain true to our commitment to ASEAN, to its centrality, its convening power, and proven positive impact in shaping regional peace and prosperity for close to 6 decades now. India takes a similar, albeit uniquely and necessarily Indian approach, with its pragmatism and pursuit of optimization of relationships via multi-aligned, multi-vector policies in its foreign relations. Indeed, our strategic partnership reflects the growing convergence of our long-term interests in the context of the historic shifts that will inform the ebb and flow of this century. In this 10th year of India's impactful Act East policy that grew out of the Look East policy, the Philippines has also turned its gaze towards India, and our visions is met. Friends, At the United Nations in 2022, I defined the transcendent challenges facing the global community: widening geopolitical polarities that threaten our hard-won peace, unresolved inequities and inequalities, powerful technologies with the power to transform, but also with the danger of destabilizing our political and social order, and the existential threat of climate change. Despite resounding calls, global unity to address these challenges have, unfortunately, become even more elusive. In the 3 years since then, geopolitical developments have exerted only greater pressure upon the very structures and norms designed to prevent and to resolve conflicts, facilitate trade-driven growth and economic integration, or urge forward collective global action. We see all these in our very own shared neighborhood of the Indo-Pacific, the locus of our hopes, growth, and a very existence. In Singapore last year, I described the realities impinging upon the region's present and future. A multipolar world being shaped by the experiences, aspirations, and agency of nations, and challenged by attempts to undermine prevailing international norms. Within this multipolar world, the impact of continuing strategic competition amongst the great powers, which permeates the evolving regional landscape and creates dilemmas that weigh on the strategic choices of regional states. The abiding relevance of ASEAN in holding the center amidst this fluidity, even as ASEAN's centrality and cohesion are under siege. The role of bridge builder nations in forging decisive multilateral actions and solutions, even as geopolitics seeps into the infrastructure of global governance. The vital importance of securing and keeping global commons free, open, and accessible for the rightful benefit of everyone. The urgent need for action on climate change, whose impact and worsening threat are very much felt by our region. And finally, the world and our region must be able to seize maximum gains from the transformative power of advanced technologies while paying due attention to their disruptive potential. Ladies and gentlemen, the responses to these realities are equally manifold. Of the many potent prescriptions, the Philippines has long stressed shoring up the rules-based order to be crucial, and this for 4 reasons. First, it is the best guarantee for the sovereign equality of all states, regardless of size. Secondly, the predictability and stability that it engenders provides an enabling environment for all states to pursue their respective aspirations. Third, it provides a credible legal regime that guarantees just and equitable access by all states to the global commons and to all frontiers that could lead to sustainable development. Fourth, it enables states to galvanize effective international action to confront challenges that any single nation could not successfully manage on its own. Yet some of our fellow defenders of the international system that we built together in 1945 have since shifted their priorities, turning more inward and prioritizing urgent national concerns, at times at the expense of the principles we used to champion collectively. Meanwhile, other powers are seeking to take advantage of this shift. Unfortunately, such narratives at times dominate, obscuring the international community's judgment. For instance, the complex issue of competing claims in the South China Sea has for years been unfortunately and simplistically reduced to the South China Sea disputes, as if claims were all equal. They are not. The assertions of literal states have to pass the test of conformity with international law, particularly the UNCLOS and definitive binding interpretations such as the 2016 arbitral award. Such misinformation or inaccurate narratives distract us from calling out illegal and unlawful actions for what they are, violations of international law. Indeed, there are those who sometimes justify such provocations under the pretext of geopolitics. Just as disconcertingly, there are those who seek to discredit international legal procedures and dismiss binding rulings to cloak opaque claims with a semblance of legitimacy. It has thus become the responsibility for all stakeholders, including the Philippines and India, to play a more active role in upholding, in defending, and in preserving our rules-based order. The Indian vision for multipolarity, which resonates with the Philippines, that emphasis on strategic agency, is no longer just an aspiration. It is an exigency. These are the moorings upon which we must anchor our strategic partnership going forward. Through our strategic partnership, the Philippines and India must assert the clarity of international law. As co-architects of the rules-based international order, we have a solid foundation on which we can build. We Filipinos are proud of our efforts to promote the rule of law, including through the 1982 Manila Declaration, the peaceful settlement of disputes. We also find inspiration in India's contributions, example, and its own adherence to the law. For a country with rapidly growing power and influence, India has submitted to the judgment of international tribunals on matters concerning maritime disputes, a model of how a responsible major power and a good neighbor should behave. We see this same responsibility and sincerity in India's Mahasagar vision, mutual and holistic advancement for security and growth across regions, on the basis of trust, transparency, and genuine respect for the rights and interests of all nations in the Indian Ocean region. The Philippines has first-hand experience of this. When our distressed seafarers sailing through the dangerous waters of the Red Sea found safety and humanity in the rescue and aid of the U.S. Navy, of the Indian Navy. Thus, when Prime Minister Modi assures the world that India intends to be Vishwa Bandhu, a friend to the world, we Filipinos feel his and the Indian people's sincerity. So looking ahead, the Philippines and India must continue to work to strengthen the resilience of our world community. Our diplomatic initiatives must buttress the current structures of global governance. These structures must withstand geopolitical shocks, remaining credible as providers of global goods and meaningful venues for nations to find common ground. At the regional level, this means continued centrality of ASEAN in the regional architecture and active engagement by all stakeholders, including India, and in ASEAN-led mechanisms. This also means meaningful linkages between the efforts of ASEAN member states and those of the Indian Ocean region, including collaborating on synergies between the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific and the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. In the broader international arena, this entails an even more active leadership by middle powers that have the capacity to reach across political and ideological lines, forge genuine consensus, and lead credible efforts towards decisive multilateral solutions. Our work to strengthen the multilateral system must ensure that the so-called major countries do not exert undue influence. It should lead to meaningful reforms in the United Nations and the Security Council itself towards inclusivity, equity, and justice. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier I touched upon how the Philippines, as do many other countries, has in its folk literature a version of the Ramayana. This attests to the universal and lasting relevance of this revered and ancient epic from these lands, that it transcends time, distance, and culture. Perhaps this appeal derives from the Ramayana's portrayal not just of friendship and of loyalty, but of such bonds being in the service of righteousness, truth, and of justice. Our Indo-Pacific home is now the world's fastest growing economic hub and the foremost driver of global growth. But the promise it holds for all of us collectively and our respective nations will not be given, but it must be secured. It behooves all of us as individual nations, as agents acting in concert with others, be it in the context of strategic partnerships, formal alliances, or any other framework, to be invested in an Indo-Pacific that is free, open, and firmly undergirded by a rules-based order. True to our common destiny, Tadhana, and in the spirit of Sadhana, our bonds and common journey, never has the Philippines and India been better positioned as now to put our ties in the service of both our peoples, as well as our larger region's future. Prime Minister Modi, with whom I met yesterday, eloquently, brilliantly described the Philippines and India as friends by choice, but partners by destiny. These words capture the sense of an inevitable friendship, anchored in a meeting of purpose for our nations and a shared journey for our peoples. With our strategic partnership, we unfurl the sails and steer our hopes and dreams through challenging tides. Our vision for a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific is our compass. Our commitment to international law is our ballast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a great privilege.
Okay. What a wonderful speech from the President of the Philippines. Okay.
Thank you, Excellency, for that very rich, layered, and nuanced address on the issues facing the Indo-Pacific, and you covered a wide array of topics
Now comes the question and answer portion. Okay.
in your address. And you also spoke about, the shared journey and the shared destiny, which not just India and the Philippines, but I think many other countries, middle powers in the entire region face together. So thank you for that. I just will raise a few questions and probe these a little further. You spoke about the strategic partnership between India and the Philippines, which we have just concluded. Now, what are the shared strategic considerations of India and the Philippines which bring them together in this? We are at a point of time when 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we all thought that global trade, free markets, and the world the way it was moving would be delivering unprecedented peace dividends to all the countries in the region. Now, the hope for dividends, those peace dividends, is gone. What we have in its place is geopolitical strategic ambiguity on every aspect. Geoeconomic ambiguity, geostrategic ambiguity. Now, in that context, I would ask, in this reframing of the current scenario, what are the strategic considerations which really shape Manila's and New Delhi's approach to the Indo-Pacific? And how is the Philippines and India too, together, how would they manage global disruptions which are taking place, including the major disruptions on trade?
Well, the first lesson I suppose we must take away from that is that wealth or affluence does not necessarily translate into peace. And so that is only for us who have been chosen as leaders of our respective countries. We must also have an eye to much more than just the building up our economy and making our people wealthier. Because the challenges that we face have very little to do with all of that. The Philippines, how we approach this problem is by really fostering alliances and partnerships, and on every level. The obvious interpretation of that would be defense and security, but that's not the only part. In terms of the economy, we are still slowly. We have, for the most part, pulled out of the ravages of COVID and the pandemic. However,
we have to now, because since the pandemic changed everything, we have to now position ourselves or re-style ourselves differently in the face of all the different circumstances that now, with climate change becoming an everyday, we're reminded of climate change every day, and with actual regional wars ongoing, with now the very, very imminent threat of world trade war. These are the only way that in the Philippines that we find that we can have at least a semblance of a guarantee of fighting for peace is by partnerships. And it's a bit of a non sequitur to say we fight for peace, but that is exactly what we do. And since we have started to be confronted with that situation, that is the solution that we find will be most effective, and is the proper thing to do, is to form these alliances, put together the coalition of like-minded states who share the same values, who adhere to international law, and who are committed to defending their territory and the exercise of their sovereign rights. And that was the Philippines has been doing. And I think that we chose the right path. I think that is the only way to keep the peace.
You take over the presidency of ASEAN next year. And I think it's at an extremely critical time that you're taking over this presidency. ASEAN has been a force for really pushing norms and rules-based order, the kinds of free trade agreements ASEAN has entered into. And you start looking at what India has been doing in the past 1 or 2 years, and especially in the last 6-7 months, has been a slew of trade agreements, trying to get into a lot of other trade agreements. Now, talking in terms of regional trade and building partnerships for regional trade within the region, which are extremely important both for India, Philippines, and the ASEAN. What are the positives that you see?
Well, I think it's not just I think building up on these trade agreements with other countries, what I sometimes describe as non-traditional trading partners, is something that became a necessity because of the lessons learned during the pandemic, when supply lines completely dried up, and you could not get any of the products that you depended on by imports. And we were reminded that a large degree of self-sufficiency is necessary for every country. Because suddenly we were confronted by the fact that the global economic system in which we had such confidence in, that it could face any crisis, it would remain robust and functioning, failed on a global level. And so this is part of the response that countries must take. I don't think it's just the Philippines, but we now say that we cannot depend on one supplier of anything. We cannot depend on one market. We really have to give ourselves more options. I was just saying in an interview that I had earlier today, that really the key to our economies is that we must be robust, we must be committed to a plan, and yet at the same time, we need to be agile. That's a very fine line to walk, and it's a movable line. It doesn't stay in one place. So that's why we have to be very conscious and to be very aware of what the world situation is and to adjust accordingly.
See, agility, I think, has been one of the great strengths of ASEAN and of most countries in the region. Going forward, this agility and this ability to adapt to changing situations, how do you see it evolving in the current global trade context?
Well, I think this is possibly, the rapid acceleration of the development of technology has a part has a part to play in this. This very rapid movement in terms of markets, in terms of supply chains, in terms of connectivity, all of the things that we have come to depend on so that our global economy continues to function. Luckily, that very fast-moving technology should also provide us the answers. AI should be able to do a lot of work that we had to do for ourselves. I mean, the last X%, or whatever that's going to be, is of course will have to be done by a human brain, by a human person, by a human being. But a great deal of the work AI can really can take over. So perhaps perhaps what we need to do is, given the challenges that these very high technologies present us, is to turn around and use those high technologies to solve the problems that are very complicated, have become very complicated, have become very detailed, that require a great deal of analysis. And hopefully these powerful tools that we are developing will be able to help us in that regard. So there is always optimism, but it is very difficult because in truth, if you ask anyone, even those who spend their lives studying the question, where will AI take us? I don't think we have yet to see a definitive answer as to what are we going to be doing in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. So, but what we have to deal with is now and then the future. And I think that that is those alliances bring the stability that will continue, that will help us continue to progress.
So you're going to Bangalore tomorrow.
Yes.
And that is the technology hub and the real technology hub of India, besides Bangalore, Hyderabad, all other places. So what are the kinds of partnerships that companies, organizations in the Philippines are looking forward to forging with Indian companies in this aspect?
Well, certainly, because the technologies that India has developed to work in the digital space are world class, and we would like to bring that technology to the Philippines, and to be able to, as I said, do some of the jobs that need doing, that only massive computers and massive and very how do we say, very inspired writing of code will require, and that is something that India can provide. But in the case of the Philippines, it's not only a one-way exchange. We are also, I think, we have made so many structural changes to our system of doing business in the Philippines that we also will invite all the tech companies to come to the Philippines and to see what it is that they can do and provide, because we are of the belief that the Philippines can provide an entry for India into ASEAN. Now, don't get me wrong, India has many avenues of entry already into ASEAN, but we can serve as a hub for many of those operations that we are hoping India will bring to the Philippines, and hopefully take it to the level where we can say these investments that were brought in by India into the Philippines are now export industries for the Philippines. And that would be a very fine result for us to have.
So you see there are very strong synergies between India's Act East and ASEAN centrality.
Well, this is what we're hoping to attain. We have to get to that point where that synergy is happening. We're not yet there. For such active economies such as India and the Philippines, 3.3 billion in trade is far too little. And there's very much we can do. And the time that we've been here, we have discovered many, many areas, and that at the very least need to be explored, and eventually, if it's worthwhile, need to be developed. So I'm very optimistic.
So do you think the current global disruption actually provides an opportunity for us to expand and think actively in terms of expanding our trades, expanding our trade relationships, and thinking of how we can grow from 3 to 30 billion?
I think it really is. It really is a very. It's very much still blue sky, and in terms of the possibilities, because the more when we talk with the economic managers, with our businessmen from the Philippines, and say, what about this? And the more we look, basically, the more we find. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that we are looking at will be a resounding success, but if you can make a success of a reasonable percentage of that, then we're on our way. That will amount to a great many jobs that will be created in the Philippines. That will be a great, a good amount of income for the Philippines. There will be, hopefully we get to the point, as I said, to export these products and all that. And so, again, it looks like it is very much up to us to pick and choose what it is, what areas. We are not limited by, not very much. We used to be limited by the distance between India and the Philippines. It's 2025. Distance doesn't matter anymore. So shall we say, difficulty is removed now. And so but then it's not only in the tech industry. So this applies to so many in the healthcare industry, pharma industry. We're talking about agriculture, space. I mentioned in my speech. So it's the gamut of and this is just business. There's also defense and security. There's also all the other things that you can work on together. But we will, and if we continue on this path and we continue on this trajectory, we will find that synergy.
Thank you very much for those answers which I got. My last question is really more to get a reaction from you. See, you spoke about the importance of middle powers and what middle powers, the role they should be playing and can be playing. How can middle powers actually again recenter a multilateral order and get it back on track? Is there how optimistic are you about it?
I'm the eternal optimist because if you lose that optimism, then you stop working. I said if you give up, you've given up hope. Once you've given up hope, you don't continue working, and or for whatever it is that you've been looking for. So yes, I maintain a healthy but cautious optimism, and but once again, the only way for middle powers to assert themselves are through being allied together and speaking, and many states, many middle powers speaking with one voice. And if there are enough of us, then that voice will be loud enough to be listened to by everyone else in the world.
So may these partnerships grow and we move into a much better and more coherent world order with this momentum. I love your optimism, and I hope all the best to you and all of us. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure having you address this audience. I know you're running late, so we've not been able to take questions from the audience, but we hope to welcome you again very soon in our midst.
Well, I hope to be back there to come and visit with you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this.
Yon. Ayun, ang ganda po ng pagbisita niya sa India. So, yung mga members, kayo po ang nauna. Okay? Thank you. Tapos na po ang live stream.